This week on the Excellent Leadership Podcast, I sat down with Dan Radakovich. Dan has spent 4 decades leading some of the most storied athletic programs in the country. He's been the athletic director of Georgia Tech, of Clemson University, and of University of Miami. And now he's stepping into his next chapter as executive director of the Football Bowl Subdivision Athletic Directors Association, FBS AD as we call it. Dan started his career at the University of Miami in 1983, straight out of grad school as the department's business manager. What followed was a career that led him through Long Beach State, South Carolina, American, LSU, Georgia Tech, and Clemson, where he spent 9 years, won 2 national titles, and helped transform one of college football's premier programs, before returning to Miami in 2021 and helped build the foundation for what became a CFP National Championship game run this past year. In our conversation, Dan walks through how the athletic director role has fundamentally changed over recent years, from autocrat to consensus builder, and as revenue growth has brought more voices, more stakeholders, and more complexity into the room. We also talk about the difference between who has a voice and who has a vote, why rushed hires are almost always the wrong hires, and what it means to partner with a head coach rather than manage one. We also get into how student athletes today think more like corporations than college kids and why Dan sees that as a good thing, along with what leaders coming from outside the industry often miss when they step into a role like athletic director. Dan, it is great to have you here. Well, Dan, thanks so much for joining the Excellent Leadership Podcast.
Thank you, Chad. Appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to our conversation. You've had 4 decades in university athletics at prestigious organizations. We'll go recently from Miami, Clemson, Georgia Tech, but your career goes beyond that. Can we just start now and kind of work backwards? How much has the athletic director job changed to where it is today from where it was when you first entered the profession?
Well, I guess if we're starting backwards, there's a lot of voices now, in our job. We've had to create more revenue. And the more revenue you create, the more people who are either giving you the money or responsible for giving you the money, and they want to have a little bit of a say. It used to be that, donors would be philanthropic and you would put their name on a building and they would be happy and they would bring people over to see their name on a building. Now, because of, the name, image, and likeness opportunities and, just corporate opportunities, people who are helping to give money to collectives or the institution to give to the student athletes through rev share, they kind of want to have a little bit more of a say. The old idea of maybe there being an owner, someone who had done summer jobs, for people, and they were very close to the football or the basketball coach. Those people still exist, but now there's just more of them. That's kind of where we are today. And boards of trustees and presidents are much, much more involved today than maybe they were 10 to 15 years ago, mostly because there's been more resources given from those entities that they're responsible for, the president and the board, to athletic departments to help mitigate the increased cost of player compensation.
So I imagine the skill set has probably changed quite a bit. Like, what skills have you needed to utilize more recently versus skills where maybe you prioritized a couple of AD jobs ago?
I think that it's a lot more consensus building today than maybe it was previously. Back when I first got in, athletic directors, and this is a term of endearment, they were autocrats. They actually ran their athletic program and with very, very little interference. Now you have to be able to be a little bit more, consensus building and listening to other people. Whether you go along with their ideas or not, that's a little bit secondary, but you have to hear them out. A lot of times, some of the people that I had grown up with in the business, they wouldn't even listen to them. That was the job of the other folks. So I got to listen to them growing up in the business. And that served me well because we understand that people who are giving of their time, talent, and treasures, to the athletic department really want to have an opportunity to, have some voice. We just have to make sure that gets mitigated a little bit.
Yeah, I have a term that I'll often use, especially when we're launching a search, of help me understand who has a voice and who has a vote, because we need to get a lot of voices involved, but who's actually making decisions? And I imagine in today's athletic environment, there's a lot of voices. It doesn't always mean they have a vote, but a lot want their voice to be a vote. And you're having to navigate this.
Exactly. And I think that idea of voice and vote is just spot on. And there's just a lot more voices than there had been in the past.
A lot of our audience is either in their first athletic director job or they're one step removed from it. Maybe they're in pro sports wanting to come over. Maybe they're in university and they're wanting to step up. How does someone differentiate themselves in such a competitive environment? Thousands of people want this job or think they want this job.
Right.
Thousands of people. You've successfully navigated differentiating yourself. What do people need to do?
Well, I think number one, they need to, and this is overstating it a little bit, they need to be very focused and work hard at the job that they're given. Okay. If they're just trying to be an athletic director, or maybe it's their first athletic director job at maybe a smaller school, you have a lot of things that are directly related to your job. You need to master those before you move on and try to do some of the other things that could help move you forward, because no one's going to give you in your current job a great recommendation unless you're doing your job. It's one of the things I tell people all the time. You need to master the job that you were hired for. And at that point in time, you earn the opportunity to do other things. That was advice I'd gotten a long time ago, and it's still true today. But young athletic directors really need to understand that they're generalists, and they don't have to be a master of one particular item, because you're getting asked about fundraising things, and one day you're going to need to go and sit in front of somebody who's a CEO of a multinational company or a very successful local company, and the next day you're sitting in front of the parent of a student athlete who feels like their son or daughter has been wronged by a coach. Now, those are two incredibly different conversations, but you need to be able to seamlessly kind of go from one to the other. You also need to be able to let your board and your president know that they have confidence in you, and you have to exude the idea when you bring them something for them to consider, a change or a hire, that you're convicted with that change or that hire, and when you bring that to them, so that they could help support you. Because for a coach to be successful or a program to be successful, everyone has to be rowing in the same direction. That's the alignment that everyone talks about, from the board to the president to the athletic director to the coach. I know it's just a grouping of words, but if you do it correctly, it is powerful. It is very powerful if everybody wants the same goal. That's what I've been lucky enough to have at a number of the spots that I've worked at, is really that vision of having success within we'll just pick football as a particular sport, in football, and helping support the coach and the institution, understanding that they have to help support the athletic director who's going to support the coach. So it's not complicated. It's just really hard to be able to do that.
How does one build their generalist muscle? How did you build your generalist muscle? Because when you're promoted up, you're promoted because you are a specialist at make it up, development, legal, compliance, real estate, whatever it might be. And then now you have to know at least enough about these other functions to make sure you're maximizing those.
Sure.
How did you build the generalist muscle?
My specific role coming up was finance. I have a master's degree in business from the University of Miami, and it was always on the dollar and cent side. So one of the things that I found out very quickly was money impacts every part of the athletic program. So you get to know your Olympic sport coaches or your revenue sport coaches as you're doing their budget, or as you're working through, how they're going to travel to different places. And you listen about how that works at individual programs. Track may travel differently than men's basketball, and how does that work? So you listen and you gather all those pieces. So when you get in charge of everything, you understand that it is different for those programs under your umbrella, how they operate. And part of the way that they operate is how they spend their money. So during that time period, I was able to understand that, gave a really good base. I then morphed into more facility construction type stuff, finance and facilities, really got to know and understand from a coach's perspective what they found to be most important in a new venue. How did it support the student athletes? How did it allow them to prepare to get ready for competition? So those are the things that, growing up in the business, I understood because of that particular role that I had. Then when I was lucky enough to become an athletic director, I could go to the finance person, the facility person, the development person, the communications person, because all those areas were parts of getting a program together, getting a building together. Each one of those played a role. So I understood how they needed to work in concert, the institution or state government, how all of those things needed to work together to have a successful building project. Or if you were working on a particular program, what were the things that were necessary to allow them to have the success that they want in that program. Because the levels of success in each program are a little different because you don't resource certain programs at a very high level. We don't like to talk about tiering sports, but in essence, you end up doing that by the amount of resources that you give them. You might not expect this particular program to win national championships, but you want them to give the student athletes a really great experience, make sure that the services that you provide those student athletes are really good. The revenue programs, and again, the ones that you want to really carry the flag for the institution, you're going to give them all of that plus to be able to make sure that they have the kind of success that will bring notoriety back to the school. Because athletic departments at their core really exist only for one reason. They exist to move forward the university's mission, getting people excited about a university. That's really why they're there. From a business perspective of a university, certainly they give an academic opportunity to student athletes to pursue the sports that they love. But from the institutional perspective, they want you to be able to bring people to campus so that on that football Saturday, you're bringing people in to see your business school, to see your engineering department, to see your ag program, whatever it is, to shine a light on that so that during other parts of the year, that dean or the president or the provost can go out and look to gather more resources for that particular program. Totally unrelated to athletics, but athletics was the vehicle that brought those people to campus.
Yeah, it's the shop window, isn't it, that gets people to say, I want to come in the store.
Yeah.
It's
Certainly.
interesting. We had John Needham recently on the podcast, and he's from Riot Games, which has League of Legends and Valorant. And to a similar degree, a lot of esports existed for the same reason, right? The esports is the shop window to get people to buy the game or play the game, right? Yeah. It's like many sports programs aren't historically profitable in and of themselves. It's there to support the rest of the broader business. But now there's this moment in time where it costs even more to operate these sports programs, and everyone's trying to figure out how to navigate this new environment.
No question. For years and years, talked about athletics, intercollegiate athletics, as being a business. If it was a business, you'd probably have two sports. It's not a business. It's just part of an institution to help showcase the broad-based nature of not only your athletic department, but of your institution as well.
So as you step into these roles, and you've transitioned yourself, you've seen a lot of head coaches and a lot of senior executives and senior administrators transition. What do people have to do right in the first 60, 90 days to onboard themselves well into an organization? Because there is this balance of listening tour, and there's also this balance of, hey, you kind of need to start making some decisions and casting what it's going to be like to work here in this new environment. What have you seen work well, and what are some watch outs for people?
You can't underestimate the listening part of it, because what you did at another school might not necessarily work at the school you're currently working for. So you've got to listen and understand what pieces in your background are going to be the most effective at your new spot. Okay, that's first and foremost. Try to find a few little wins, because the people that hired you would love to see a few little wins to validate their choice in you being their selection. Try to find a few of those along the way. And like a lot of things, Chad, you really just have to have some good fortune as well. When teams win national championships, it's incredibly rare that they were unscathed throughout the entire year. Okay, they might have won all their games, but it may be because a field goal attempt hit the upright and bounced the other direction for the opposing team, or a pass was intercepted late in the game, by your defense, and you won the game. You've got to have good fortune to win a championship. And as you transition from one position to another, you also have to have some good fortune. You need to assess your team. I was never one to come in and just clean house and bring new people in, because it just wasn't my style. I figured that there was a lot of really good things associated with that athletic department a few days before I walked in to the day I walked in. Let's see how we could make that work. But you also have to start setting setting a goal and setting a work ethic that may not have been there previously. If you're going to work hard, you expect everyone else to work hard. And then people will, in many cases, the places that I've been, they self-select out of different roles. And it gives you then the opportunity to bring in some people maybe that you have familiarity with, or maybe can take the role and take it to a different level than the incumbent would have done had they stayed. So listen, find a few wins, good fortune.
On that note, what is establishing culture in the first 60, 90 days? So elaborate on that more.
Yeah, I think that really comes down to your work ethic. You've got to show up, and my particular management style has always been walking around, seeing people. I didn't want to just sit at a desk and, just wait for people to come and visit me. It was always really important for me to go down to the facilities area, to the communications bullpen, to the compliance office, and just see some of whoever was in charge of that area, but not just them. Don't just walk into the chief's office. Talk to the people who are supporting that area as well, to let them know, hey, I am watching what you're doing. I may not know exactly what you're going about doing, but I want you to just know that the corner office is really going to support you in whatever you like to do. And if you have a good idea, this is probably the other thing that's pretty important, to just let your whole department know. And you could do it in a departmental setting where you're talking to all 150 to 200 of employees, but it's really better to do that department by department and look at it and say, hey guys, if you have a really good idea, or if you're thinking of something that could make your job easier or do something good for the department, come and see me. The door's open. I mean, one of the things that was really important for me was there had to be a glass door into the athletic director's office so that people could see when I'm in there, that they could just stop by and say hello. That was critical.
Did you change that in every office you worked in?
Everyone.
Really? I love that.
Yeah, it was important for people to know that. And you also have to, your assistant has to also know that, the drawbridge doesn't always have to be up to your office. They can let people just walk in. Hey, I'm going to see Dan for a second. Okay, go ahead. It's not like, well, let me announce you to come in. That's not the world we live in. And I think it's kind of important for your employees to know that they can come in. And I always told them, I said, look, the only time that door will probably be closed, or, you really can't come in, is, well, now if you're on a Zoom call, you sometimes have to do that. But if it was a personnel issue, you didn't want people coming in. Okay. But any other time, come on in. I would always have people who would come in for other meetings. Maybe they were not part of that particular project, but they were just interested in it. Come on in, just sit here and listen. Because that's one of the ways that I learned along the way. I had mentors that would allow folks to sit in, and you didn't necessarily say anything because it might not have been what you were an expert in, but you got another piece of the puzzle by just being able to listen and understand how this particular project worked. So that open door is I think very important.
So all of us in leadership roles have to hire a lot. None of us bats 1,000%. No. Right. So we're all trying our best, working hard, putting in systems, processes, involving other people, having metrics, but we still sometimes don't get it right. What are common themes when hires haven't worked? Was it something missed in an interview process? Is it something with onboarding? Any advice you can give to leaders when they're making important hiring decisions as to, hey, watch out for this and don't compromise on this?
Coaching hires are in a whole different realm, so we'll leave those off to the side. But your administrative hires, number one, if they're going to be on your executive team, you need to spend an awful lot of time making sure that you're having a conversation with them and you're not going to get bored having that conversation with them. Whether it's about work items or non-work items. And you really have to go in and say, look, why are you coming here? Is your family good with you coming here? Do you realize there are these kind of factors in this town that are good and some are bad? Are you familiar with that? Does that work for you? So your upper level management people, because sometimes they were better compensated, you got those pretty right. The ones that were really difficult and where there was churn, were the middle management people. And that was the one that the batting average was probably not really good, whether it was in Atlanta, whether it was in Clemson, whether it was in Miami, because people wanted to come and be a part of the programs. And then they get there and they say, I'm not sure this is right for me. That's when it becomes difficult. Do you move them somewhere else in the organization? Do you recommend that, hey, you really probably need to start looking for another job because this isn't working here. Those are the more difficult conversations. As much time as you can spend with somebody beforehand, it will be well worth it, because the worst hires I ever made were rushed hires. We've got to get this person in here because we're getting backed up in these areas. They're good enough. Well, normally if that's what comes to your mind, that they're good enough, it's probably the wrong answer.
I've been guilty of the same thing. I've had times where in my mind, I thought to myself, even if we're hiring Bs are better than nobody. I don't know if that's true. I actually think nobody in a burnt out team of A+ is probably better if you can navigate it and solve it over time.
Yes, I would rather not offer the job. One of the things you learn over time, not offer the job until you get the right person, and just have the organization suck it up, utilize the institution for some assistance, if you have to do that for a little while. But bringing someone onto the team that doesn't fit the team is a time suck, because you're always either working around that person, and then your high performers, they realize that, wait a minute, I'm taking up the slack that, Joe or Sally should be doing. And why am I doing that? That's really not my job. So now you have two disgruntled people. You're disgruntled because you have this employee that isn't doing well, and one of your key performers is disgruntled because they're having to pick up the slack. That's when you get into a little bit of a jackpot. So take your time, make sure you hire the right person, and you'll know it in your gut whether you hired the right person.
I'm going to take a moment for a brief interruption. If you're enjoying the show, can you do me a favor and like and subscribe? We're building our audience. We love the quality of the speakers and guests that we get on our show, and it helps us as we increase engagement and participation and followership. So like, subscribe, do me that favor. Back to the show. So you won't brag on yourself, but you've had outsized success in football programs at schools you've been a part of. Clemson did phenomenal when you were there. Miami, what an incredible year. I know you're not calling the X's and O's. I know you're not choosing all the players. You are hiring a coach. You're partnering with a coach. Why have those worked? Why have you had the successes you've had building football programs?
You said the key word there, partnering, because I didn't hire Mario. He was hired a week before I was there, and Dabo was entrenched when I got to Clemson. I did hire Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech, and Paul's fantastic and just one of the most interesting people I've ever been around. He was a lot of fun to work with. But both Mario and Dabo were partners, and I walked in that way. And I let them know, I'm here to support you. I'm here to take the administrative side of your vision and make sure that you don't have to worry about that, so that you can concentrate on the X's and O's. At Clemson, Dabo just really wanted his own place. He had a football office set up that really didn't fit what he wanted for a long-term forever home for Clemson football. So we started to work on how that would come about. It was something that was very intentional, and we made that known to members of the board, made it known to the president, made it known to donors. They opened that up a month after they won the 2016 national championship. So they actually won the championship in the old building. It set the stage for, future successes that they had. It was important to him because of how he wanted to portray a football student athlete at Clemson. And that building actually, that was his manifestation of what that experience should be. From how the cafeteria was put together, how the locker room was pulled together, to the slide that he had from the second floor down to the first floor that he saw at Google and just had to be put into the building. All of those things, we're partners, and he brings up some great ideas, and we have to go about working through to get them implemented. At Miami, it was like Mario had been on the staff at Alabama. He had been at Oregon. He had been a successful coach there. Obviously, coming from Clemson, I kind of knew what a great football team looked like. And early on, it just wasn't that. I mean, you could just look at it and say the folks that were there were not the kind of individuals who wonderful young people, but they weren't the level that Mario had wanted. So he set about creating that foundation from the inside out. As a former offensive line coach, he took care of the lines of scrimmage, and then he went outside and got the receivers and running backs. And, over the last couple of years, and particularly last year, you saw the fruits of that labor. And I think that they're going to be very, very good for years to come, because he was able to put the foundation together that he thought was going to be really the best thing for the program. Now, we did do a couple of facility things to kind of update that, because you just have to do that in order to move forward. But with player compensation and NIL opportunities, it really has shifted a little bit away from the facility building and more into using those dollars to get the student athletes to commit to your institution. They're expensive. So that's one of the reasons why I think he's done a really great job of bringing the right people together and making them coalesce as a team. He's very intentional at a lot of team building activities, because when you have a team of 105 student athletes, not all of them are getting paid. And of course, some of them are getting paid a lot more than others. At that point in time, you have to kind of meld things together. But I will give this to the student athletes of today. They all want to play professional football, if we're talking about football right now. You go into the beginning meeting with freshmen, and there's 25 or 30 freshmen in there in that opening class, and you ask the question, how many of you want to be in the NFL? And all 30 hands go up. Obviously the numbers game doesn't work that way, but I think they understand that, okay, I am this position, and this position, if you graph everything out from a compensation perspective, is not going to be as valuable as another position. They read that. They read what NFL defensive ends or quarterbacks or wide receivers, what they make, running backs, what they make. They know that it's a mirror of what's going to be the circumstance on a college team. So I think all the folks that thought that there was going to be great infighting over, what student athletes are being paid, I don't think that's happened. I also think that student athletes today are much more corporate than maybe they were 10 or 15 years ago. They were college kids 10 or 15 years ago, okay, doing stupid things and, just being college kids. Now, with the compensation that they're getting, they're mini companies, okay? And they realize that whether they look themselves in the mirror and know, it's highly unlikely that of those 30 hands that went up my freshman year, that 5 are going to get to maybe go, or less, go to play in the NFL. How am I going to make this time a great opportunity for me and help set me up for my next phase of life? That's really something that has clicked for a lot of student athletes, and not just in football, but in other sports as well.
So stay on this topic for me. You're talking about the culture coalescing and kind of accelerating people working well with one another. I find this fascinating because in historical years, you had 100+ guys on a team, and the coach could rely on the seniors and the juniors to be culture carriers for the sophomores and the freshmen. And there was a high likelihood that freshmen, by the time they were a senior, had 4 years inside of this culture. Things change rapidly. It's not uncommon to see 50+ new faces on a football team, and to know of those 50+ faces, half of them might not be there the next year. So There's this need to accelerate coalescing and making sure that we're all aligned for what might be a short period of time. What are you seeing work well in getting culture just to immediately cement within programs? Because I think there's a lot we on the business side can learn from that, because it's easy sometimes to, hey, let's move slowly. There's no freedom to move slowly in sports programs anymore. You've got to sprint.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to that idea of everyone's a free agent right now. In the history of professional sports, all of a sudden a guy who had a nice contract maybe didn't perform up to their capabilities in year 1 or 2 of the contract, but now they're in year 3 and they're going to become a free agent. All of a sudden they have a great year and they get a new contract. Well, just think about that for the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. They go through and they all want to play and they all want to, whatever they're getting. And then they see themselves as well, maybe I'm second team. Maybe I don't get as many reps as I would have wanted to, but I don't want to be a problem, because if I'm a problem, I won't get another opportunity. It goes back to that little corporate mentality that I mentioned earlier. I think that they've seen that I don't want to be the guy who is a troublemaker. I'm going to go and do what I need to do. And if this opportunity doesn't work, highly likely there'll be someplace else for me to go at a fairly nice compensation rate to see if I could start over and really do some good things during the 4 years, and now maybe 5 years for 5 within their particular sport.
So we're in this moment in time in sports as a whole where a lot of organizations are curious about outside of industry talent, right? We see it. We're responsible for some of these. Sometimes it's the right decision to go outside. Sometimes it's the wrong decision to go outside, and organizations need to be thoughtful about where they are. But what I find interesting moving that to the talent side is very few of us could probably name Satya's best engineer at Microsoft. Very few of us could probably name Elon's best engineer at Tesla. In a sports program, a lot of people can name the number 2 at a university athletics program. I think it's different managing a famous person, a household name. What are these executives from other industries maybe not knowing when they step into a role like an athletic director or a CEO of a major program where they're recognizable, and oh, by the way, their number 2 is more famous than they are?
I think it goes back to that partner thing that I talked about. Will someone give enough of themselves coming from the outside of athletics, not having grown up with it, not having watched other people manage coaches, see coaches at their best, see coaches at their worst, when they needed a hug, when they need a kick in the rear, when they need, some tough love? You have to be able to understand that cadence. And someone coming from the corporate world, where it was very maybe autocratic within their organization. Hey, I'm the vice president of sales. I'm going to tell you how to go about doing this. And that's just the way it is. I'm going to tell you, you have to do it or I'll fire you. And that's more the corporate mentality. That's not the college mentality. And I think that's the one thing that's we can't miss, because we're still dealing with young people. We're still dealing with a college environment where people are going to grow. And not just the student athletes, but all the people around campus. They're not now being led by a corporate entity. They're being led by somebody who started in the university business office, moved up to assistant controller, became treasurer, became CFO. So they kind of moved up the whole deal, and they understand the whole thing around them. To have someone come in and question how they go through things probably is not a really good idea if you want to be able to, play nice with everyone in the sandbox. Not to say that corporate people can't come in and have the empathy that's necessary to be able to do that. But this is still a highly personal business. It's exhausting. The personnel side of this business is 100% exhausting. Look, every August, the same thing happens. Every December, the same thing happens from outside of people. You know when you're going to go to camp. You know when you're going to recruit. You know when basketball is going to start. You know when first pitch is in the spring. You know what's going to happen at spring meetings or fall meetings within your league. Those are all very, very rote items. And you can get pretty good at that. If you're going to build a building in a state environment, you know that there are 15 steps to get that building built. And you know you can't go from step 7 to step 10 because you got to hit 8 and 9 before you get to 10. So you can master all of that. What's hard to master are people. If there's one thing that I've spent more time on, it's listening to people and trying to make sure that we put them in the best circumstance possible. Coaches and even administrators, look, they have lives outside of the building. Things might not be working out great for them, but you've got to listen. You've got to be empathetic. You've got to be able to, because these are your most highly compensated employees. So you've got to treat them that way. And you've got to be there for them. The greatest gift that you can give to one of your employees is time, that you can just sit there and listen to them. And I think that's something that we as an industry can't forget.
Yeah, I agree with you. I spent 10 years of my career hiring outside of sports entirely, Fortune 1000 companies. And still today, a lot of our client portfolio would be Fortune 1000 sporting goods companies, sports technology, media companies that are in it. And in those worlds, it's not uncommon that the CEO, maybe they come from a finance background and they're world-class at managing the P&L and they're strong at financial engineering and recapitalizing and structuring debt. Or they might come from a very strong promotional background where they're great at sales or packaging or production of sorts. Rarely is the winner in those industries someone whose superpower is stakeholder management. They don't have to do stakeholder management. No. They've got a chair, but they're the CEO running the organization primarily, and they autocratically can say, this is where we're going. In the world of athletics, and even some in pro sports, people management, stakeholder management is half the job. You can be the smartest person on the entire planet with the greatest ideas, and if people say, I'm not interested, they struggle moving it forward.
Or you never get to implement your programs because you're dealing with personnel issues all the time, okay? You have 200 and some odd employees. You have 400 or 500 student athletes. That's 700 individuals that could at any point in time, that sprocket can come off the widget, and now you have to deal with that. Those are the things that make it kind of interesting. I'm not saying this is not by any means a negative. It's just the reality of what you have to deal with.
Is stakeholder management a muscle you can build, or is this something that some people are just born with, really navigating complex waters with lots of people and wanting to pull rather than push?
I think you can develop it for sure. I was really bad at it early in my career. And then you figure out that it's a lot better. A velvet glove is better than a hammer, because you need people to be on your side in order to move your agenda forward. So how do you co-opt them? And the way you co-opt them is to listen to them when they're having an issue. Okay, and try to help solve their issue. Because if you solve their issue, they're going to help solve your issue. I think you definitely can develop that over time. And patience is really, really important. And understand that it's highly unlikely, unless you're a football coach in the fourth quarter with less than 2 minutes left, that you have to make a decision right away on what play to call or what defense to run. Most of the other decisions associated in intercollegiate athletics, you can kind of take a beat, especially administrative. They don't have to be decisions that are made right away. And sometimes it's better for you to maybe talk to some people, whether it's colleagues or maybe somebody who had this circumstance before, or if you have the kind of boss where you have the relationship and just say, hey, I need 3 minutes, and here's the long and short of it. What do you think? Have you ever, done that before? Those kind of relationships and answers to questions, really, they go a long way.
What about mental toughness and resilience? How do you build that? Because in a role like the ones you've held, the whole world gets to shine a spotlight in and have an opinion on that worked or that didn't work. If you're a tech company executive, as an example, most people don't know if the beta test didn't go well, right? Maybe they talk about it in the investor circles. But in a role like yours, you go out to eat, people have an opinion on what's happening in a sport, or perhaps the sport didn't do well a couple of years in a row and they're talking about it on television. It's easy for that to get somebody down and to beat somebody up. How do you develop resilience?
I don't know that there's a textbook for developing resilience. You have to have a great family, because it's usually not you, because you're in the middle of it. And you're either trying to fight your way out of it or, solve the problem. It's the people around you who get a lot more of the sideward glances and bad stuff at the grocery store or things of that nature, especially in smaller towns. But you just have to let it go in one ear and out the other. I would occasionally, for just reading pleasure, go on chat rooms and see how bad I was.
Really?
As an athletic director.
What do you remember some of the things people said about you?
He's just hired help. He's why is he even here? He's making these decisions. It's not going to be good. And, the ticket prices are too high. I couldn't get my same parking spot. If I can't get that parking spot, I'm never coming back. And then 2 months later, you look back, oh yeah, that guy renewed his parking spot because he wants to go watch the football game. So you have to let people vent and all those kind of things. But occasionally, I will say this, occasionally there are really good ideas from people outside of the department. Just as in any business, there's really good ideas. The trick is to be able to funnel through and say, you know what, that person has a real point there. So you bring it into your next meeting and say, hey, have we ever thought about this? And sometimes you get a lot of blank stares back. No, we've never thought of that. Other times, yes. And the reason we didn't do that is because of these 5 or 6 reasons, which now make great reason and rationale as to why you didn't do it. You've always got to be able to keep asking those questions. There are very few new ideas. There's just the right time to ask whether that right idea can be implemented now.
Yeah, timing and then operational excellence of actually bringing it to life often go a lot farther than just a good idea.
Absolutely. There's been things that we had talked about very early on in my tenure at Clemson that right after I went to Miami, they all happened. And it was like 9 years later, almost 10 years later. And it's like the gestation period of some of these ideas was about 10 years because they weren't revolutionary. We split no atoms, didn't create nuclear fusion, at the time, but it was just the right time for those things to move forward. That's a good thing.
So go down memory lane with me briefly, and then I'll wrap us up. Georgia Tech, look back at that chapter. What's something that just stands out at you that you just grin ear to ear when you think about when this moment happened or when we accomplished this?
I'd say, how Paul Johnson, came in and took a football program and did something different. Georgia Tech always prides themselves on being, very, very intellectual. And it is a fabulous school from the standpoint of engineering and any other kind of architecture that goes along with that. Him coming in and doing something different gave the folks at Georgia Tech a great amount of pride. They were not the behemoth large public school. To be able to go and beat Georgia, in Georgia was just, oh my gosh, what a wonderful thing that was. Then winning a national championship there in women's tennis was a lot of fun. Brian Shelton was the coach, and he's probably one of the most intelligent people that I've ever been around as it relates to not only his sport, but just life in general. He went from Georgia Tech to Florida, and now he's coaching his son, Ben, on the men's tour. And Ben is a rising star in men's tennis.
Yeah, he's fun to watch.
He really is.
What about Clemson? Same question for Clemson. Look back at Clemson.
That was pretty easy because, standing on the field after winning the 2016 championship and looking up in the stands at the people who've invested so much in that program for so many years, just enjoying the heck out of that was just, that was just a heck of a moment. From a brick and mortar piece, all the changes that we were afforded the opportunity to do there to help continue to create revenue for the program that still exists today. And the idea that you can do that and it could be good for the fans and it could also be good for the institution. The building pieces there they were so much fun to be able to do because we transformed how that whole athletic district looked.
I love that area of South Carolina, just from Clemson up through Greenville. What a special part of America that a lot of people haven't experienced, but they need to.
Yeah, they really do. Greenville as a town, I don't know if they give if they give lifetime achievement awards for urban planners. Greenville is a great town to walk, and the hotels and the restaurants, and it's just a phenomenal place. And anybody who goes up to the Bon Secours Wellness Center for a basketball tournament, they leave there and they say, wow, this was just such a great tournament, such a great place to watch things. So yes, the upstate of South Carolina is a really nice spot. All
right. And you know the drill. Same question. Miami. Look back at most recent years at Miami.
Well, that's so recent. I don't know that the history's been able to look back on it, but to really partner with Mario and our university president and our board to help move the thought process of the athletic program back to where it had been previously with the expectation of winning in football. We had some great moments in basketball as well. We'd go to the Final Four this past year with a new coach, had the largest turnaround in school history and ACC history as far as, the record from one year to the next. those are points of pride associated there. But probably the biggest piece in Miami is just looking at the staff and the cohesion that staff has now moving forward. I think that's going to serve them well for an awful long time. And, Mario is just a great leader, and he's going to continue to do wonderful things with their football program.
Congratulations on a tremendous career to date, and still many more stories to be written. I'm going to wrap us up with 7 questions we ask everybody. This is what we call our 7-question blitz.
Ooh.
First, what sports event have you still never attended that's on your bucket list?
Indianapolis 500.
Oh, that'd be a blast. You're the first person saying that on this.
The pageantry and just the sheer size of it. I mean, every year they show how many things could be put inside the infield of the Indianapolis 500. And it blows my mind. I said, I have to go and see this and experience it at one point in time. Plus, it's a really cool piece of Americana.
What's a leadership habit that you're trying to actively develop and improve upon right now?
I don't know that you can ever have enough patience. I think that that's something that I continue to try to do. Now, patience, as it relates to work, is great, but now being retired, you have patience for things that you don't really control. Going back to your family and other pieces of your life, the doctor may not call you back right away, or the pharmacy might not be there on time. And I never had to worry about that before, but you do now. It's a different kind of patience.
What's your favorite sporting memory? Whether you participated, whether you attended, whether it was at one of your schools, what jumps to mind when I ask you your favorite sporting memory?
I said it a couple of minutes ago, the 2016 championship at Clemson. That was really special for a lot of reasons. It's just seeing any memory where you saw people who had invested so much time that, it wasn't just the coaches or players, but it was the people around, whether it was presidents, board members, fans, neighbors. I mean, they have been invested in these programs for an awful long time. And to see that ultimate success come to them and just see the smile that it gave them. I mean, that's worth $1 million.
What do you nerd out on outside of the office? Something you're passionate for that maybe a lot of people don't know?
I really love to watch documentaries on TV. If that's kind of the answer.
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just really like watching the documentaries, whether it's on Netflix or Prime or HBO Max or whatever. And it's fascinating to me to see how people have gone from one spot in their life to another. It doesn't have to just be individual folks, but great historical recounts of things that have happened in the past that I wouldn't have been a part of. I think that if I was ever reincarnated, I'd come back in Cocoa Beach, Florida, back in the early 60s during the space race. I think that that's probably one of the coolest times of just the 60s and that early spot as we were technologically trying to be in a race with another country. Okay. And the communications were so different. And it's not like today where you can just pick up the phone or you have your iPhone behind you. You had to actually be on a phone, or you had to actually write a letter, and you had to actually get these communications back and forth. And we sent people to the moon. Phenomenal.
I mean, it's an exciting time now in space race because you have everyone from Rocket Labs to SpaceX to Virgin Galactic, like all these other companies now, but they can all learn from each other and see live streams and YouTube and internet. Yeah. And at that point, you're just hearing what's happening in Russia. You have no idea. You're not there.
No idea.
It's second, third, fourth person accounts.
That's right. That's why I think that era was incredibly exciting.
And do you have a documentary on that for me?
I don't have a documentary.
Okay. Give me a documentary recommendation though. What's one that you liked recently?
There was a documentary on the 70s, because I grew up in the 70s. It was like, there was 2 separate ones. I don't recall the title of it, but they went from like 70 to 74 and then 74 to 79. And it was just fascinating because I lived a lot of that. And I think it was HBO Max had that one. It was just it was really cool.
So any professional pet peeves, things that happen in the office that just drive you mad when it happens?
People who cancel meetings like 10 minutes before the meeting starts. That one, I don't exactly like a whole lot. I feel like it's, look, my time's pretty valuable. I know yours is too, but let's do better.
Yeah, I understand. If you couldn't have a career in sports, what would your career have been?
Hospital administrator.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because actually I went to the University of Miami. My MBA is in healthcare administration. And I thought that I would be running a hospital. So in between, when I left from college to come to the University of Miami, that summer in between, I did some internship kind of things at a local hospital, found it really cool. And as it turned out, many years later, running an athletic program, I said, well, I actually did the same thing. As an athletic director, you're really like the CEO of the hospital because you have communications, you have facilities, you have all compliance, you have legal, you have all these different areas of a hospital. We have the exact same stuff in an athletic program. As it relates to your doctors, you have your cardiosurgeons, your neurosurgeons, your orthopeds, your general folks, and there's all your coaches that are there. And some need more love than others in that circumstance to help the organization run great. So yeah, hospital administrator.
That's a great parallel that I haven't heard before, but I can see your point. Like there's so much similarity into running a hospital as there would be in an athletic program.
Plus you make people feel better.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great thing.
Last one for you. I think Atlanta is your favorite place you've lived, but you've also lived other great places. So what is your favorite restaurant in one of your hometowns?
If I go back to Clemson, if I'm giving a restaurant recommendation, it's really not for the food. Okay, Chad, it's not for the food. It's for the ambiance.
Okay.
You've got to go to the SO Club.
SO Club.
In Clemson. It's just part of Americana. It's part of Clemson. It's just the coolest little place. And you go there and people enjoy it. We used to have all of our Christmas parties there as an athletic staff at the SO Club, and people would just have a ball. It's most famous during football Saturdays. So, of course, all of our people are working, so they never had a chance to go there. So we would go in December and would have a nice party there. But the SO Club's a little part of Americana that you can't skip.
Dan Radakovich, thanks so much for joining. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Chad. Appreciate it.